Hey everybody, welcome to the Orange Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe with Mary Kay Cabot. A Hey Mary Kay edition of the podcast here, recording this on Monday. It's about 3:50. These questions from our Football Insider subscribers, cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page to get involved with that. I'll also just throw this stuff out at the top. I usually say it at the end, but all the places you can find us. Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com is our YouTube. We do put up our pods there so you can watch. We've got shorts, all sorts of things there. Our Instagram is Orange and Brown Talk, and our Twitter is Orange Brown Talk. So just off the top, if you're sitting here listening, find those things. Go to those apps on your phone, give us a follow, and stay in touch with us at all those places. All right, Mary Kay, let's get to it. With the schedule coming out last week, there were a few questions about expectations for the Cleveland Browns. And we'll go with this question from Christian in Hudson. Hey, Mary Kay, what is a realistic expectation for Browns fans going into the 25 season, given the apparent difficult schedule and uncertainty at quarterback? Is it a realistic possibility that if the Browns start poorly, they might find themselves tanking for the number one overall pick before they reach Halloween?
Oh, it is a great question, right?
It's too early to think about the season being over by Halloween, though.
I know. We need to keep it going a little longer than that. But when I looked at that schedule, you really have to wonder, which of these games are they going to be able to win when we don't even know who the quarterback is going to be? I think they're going to have some really good things going on this year, including a good running game, which will help everything. I think the defense is going to be able to still do some good things. I think they will have a better passing game, but we just don't know who the quarterback is going to be. And because of that, it's very hard for me to predict this schedule. Now, one thing that I have been saying over and over and over again is if you don't turn the ball over 34 times, which is the most in the NFL or tied for the most in the NFL, if you don't do that, if you just cut back, way back on that number, I think you can win 3 more football games based on that alone by flipping the script on the turnover differential. Grab some interceptions, force some fumbles, and play some clean ball on the offensive side. That has to be the number one priority on this football team, is to win the turnover battle every single week. Not going to be easy, but they have to try to do that. And if they do that, I think you're already at 6 victories, and then you can get another one somewhere. So if they can do that, and it's a big if, I have them somewhere in the 7-8 neighborhood. Once again, it's going to be dependent on getting good, clean quarterback play, especially.
Yeah, I think the turnover thing is the biggest part of it all. Something I know you've been talking about all offseason. Like not just protecting the ball better, but also getting forcing those game-changing plays, like you were saying, whether it's strip sacks or interceptions, or just giving your offense some kind of chance to do something. I'm a little closer to like that 5-6 range, probably. I'm not super optimistic about that season, but I still think you can do some good things this year, even if you are kind of in that range. And I do, since we're talking about this, I do just want to throw this, because I said there were a couple of questions. Our guy Carloso in Plymouth, Massachusetts mentioned that, many pundits are ranking the Browns dead last in their power rankings. And he thinks a lot of that has to do with the atrocious offense having a collateral impact on the defense. So if this team has, he says, top half of quarterback play, top third running game, healthy O-line, and a top third defense, they could certainly be a better football team than people are giving them credit for. I think some of that might be a little ambitious, but the idea is if you have just competent quarterback play, if you're forcing turnovers and protecting the ball, and if you can kind of control the game a little bit with your run game, that at least gives you a chance in some of these games, or maybe you can steal one or two that you maybe didn't expect to win.
Exactly, 100%. And I think just by virtue of running the ball a bunch more than you did in 2024, running it well, running it effectively, running it explosively, and hitting some of those home runs, I think that's going to help tremendously. It's going to let you possess the ball, control the clock a little bit, keep your defense off the field a little bit more, keep them a little bit fresher and not as tired as they got last year. So, support your quarterback, help your quarterback with that running game. So if you can get some sacks and you can get some takeaways on defense and you can run the ball and once again, manage the game in a efficient and clean way from your quarterback position, then you can hover maybe around 500. That again, that might be a little bit optimistic with everything that we're looking at here, but that has to be the goal. I mean, that just absolutely has to be the goal. And clean QB play is what they're hoping to get from a Kenny Pickett or a Dillon Gabriel or a Joe Flacco or a Shedeur Sanders. Who knows where this is going?
Well, and that's what makes this quarterback competition so interesting too, is when we talk about that clean quarterback play and just going back to the running the ball thing too. Kevin Stefanski's teams, when they've been effective offensively, have usually been really good running the football. And then you go back and you look to last year, they were 23rd in rushing yards per play and they were 29th in rushing yards per game. And that's just not a Kevin Stefanski team when we've seen this offense at their best. They run the ball a lot. You know, it's not some old school 1980s attack, but they do have a strong running game and they're focused on it. So that's just an aside. But the quarterback competition is so interesting because you do have, I think, two guys in Kenny Pickett and Dillon Gabriel who probably are going to be a little bit safer. Probably not going to turn the ball over as much. Then you have Joe Flacco, who is definitely going to turn the ball over a lot. But it's sort of a, the upside of that is, of course, 300-yard games and a bunch of touchdowns. And Shedeur, I don't know. I mean, he threw 10 interceptions last year at Colorado. I think there were some that you sit there and you watch and you're like, oh, I don't know. That has me a little worried. I could see a world where he's one of those quarterbacks that throws a bunch of interceptions in the NFL. But I don't know. With a better run game, better line play, maybe not. So I don't know. I don't know if they're going to look at this as like, let's just take the safest option at quarterback, or let's take the guy with the highest upside at quarterback and start him this year.
Well, it's going to be a tough call, I think, because the more I think about it and the more I look at this schedule, the more I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe Joe Flacco stepping in here and there is not going to be the worst thing in the world, because you know that he can handle some of these big games and these big moments. And he played well for the Browns and he was suited to this offense. He took to it like nothing. I mean, he just adapted to it so well, and the Browns just knew how to use him. Now, if he starts throwing it all over the yard and throwing picks, that's not going to fly. But I could see him looking really, really good in this quarterback competition, even though he's going to go third and fourth with Shedeur Sanders at the outset of it. And I know that the Browns really are hoping and believe that Kenny Pickett can be their opening day starter and win this job. But I think Joe's going to give him a run for his money, and he's going to dazzle in camp with that very big arm. And if you can make guys like Jerry Jeudy and Dave Njoku look really, really good, and Cedric Tillman, then you're going to gain some ground very, very quickly in this quarterback competition. Think of what Joe Flacco did for Amari Cooper and David Njoku in 2023, right? So if he can do that, in the same way that Jameis Winston stepped in and helped Jerry Jeudy become a Pro Bowler and a 1,000-yard receiver, if you can make those guys look really good and hit some of those huge plays downfield, those are eye poppers and those are dazzlers, and it's going to be very, very tempting to want to have some of that. Now, conversely, you've got to protect that football. You can't be throwing interceptions. But if he can cut those down and still make those big plays, he's going to give all of these other quarterbacks a huge run for their money.
So let's go back a little more to the question, just sort of like with the way the schedule is set up too. And I think this is kind of the case for going with a Kenny Pickett or a Joe Flacco early and maybe a Flacco early, is the fact that, everybody talks about the schedule and they make the joke that, well, we know the opponent, so why does the release matter? I think this schedule is exactly why the actual schedule release matters, because let's say this was starting. Let's say the first two games on this schedule were, and there aren't very many easy games, but let's say the first two games were at New York and at Las Vegas, or at New York and at New England. I mean, those, I don't know who the Browns will be favored against and who they won't be, but I can tell you they aren't going to be favored probably in any of their first 5 or 6 games. Whereas if they were opening against the Jets or opening against the Raiders or opening against the Patriots, you might feel a little better about getting off to a good start as opposed to having to face Joe Burrow Lamar Jackson, Jordan Love, Jared Goff, then travel to London for Minnesota, then take on Pittsburgh, then Tua. It's I mean, the NFL is really there. It's a punch to start the season. This is not an easy way to start the season, and you do worry a little bit if things don't go your way in the opener, and then Baltimore beats you, and then like if you do start to get 0-4, 0-5, that pressure really starts to build, even if you're losing to teams that maybe you weren't expected to beat anyway.
Absolutely 100%. And in addition to starting with two AFC North games and needing to be ready to roll from the jump, starting in week 4, they embark on a stretch of 4 out of 5 on the road. 4 out of 5 on the road. I mean, wrap your brain around that for a minute. That is unbelievable. And again, after those two AFC North games to start out the season, they head into those 3 straight playoff teams, the NFC North playoff teams. And mixed in there, again, starting in week 4, is starting the 4 out of 5 on the road, including in London. Okay, that's supposed to be a home game, but it's not a home game. That's traveling, 7 hours or 6, 7 hours on a plane to get to your destination and playing a game over there in a different time change when the Vikings will already be acclimated to the time change and everything else that you have to do to acclimate to being over across the pond, because they're playing in Dublin the week before. So this is going to be very, very challenging for them. And I do think that it will have an impact on the quarterback competition. I don't think that you can take your good old time trying to figure out who your starting quarterback is. I think you need to know as soon as possible. I wrote something about this today. They are going to start out OTAs with concurrent passing camps going on, basically. It's why they signed all those tryout players, all those tryout receivers. So right now they have got about a dozen receivers to work with, and they'll split them up about 6 and 6, and they'll run concurrent passing camps basically in OTAs and probably the mini camp and things like that. And they need to find out as soon as they possibly can who is going to be taking most of those first team reps when you get to a certain point in training camp. Now, you could start out training camp still kind of calling this a 4-way competition, and you can keep that going for a while. But very soon, I think, this is just me talking, very soon after you get into training camp, you have got to identify your guy and let him get up and running in this offense, or you're going to stumble out of the gate the same way that you did last year. And then you're going to start to lose your veterans. And then you're going to have the stuff going on behind the scenes. And you don't need that. You don't need that. We already know that Myles Garrett wanted the heck out of here. He wanted no part of this reboot, right? So you've got to keep these guys interested. You've got to keep the possibility of grabbing a wild card spot alive as long as you possibly can. And so I think that you need to be done with your quarterback competition as fast as you possibly can. And you better know going into training camp who you think is going to win it.
Yeah, and that's one of the complications of this season too. Is you're going to go in and you're obviously going to try to win as many games as you can. So who knows? Maybe you end up being the surprise team that's in playoff contention. Oh, we thought the Browns were going to be terrible, and here they are fighting for a wild card. But there also would come a point where there comes a point this season, if it kind of goes the way it seems like it might go, where you've got to find out about these young guys that you drafted too, because you have this great opportunity in the next draft to either draft, a potential franchise quarterback, or if you believe that Dillon Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders is a franchise quarterback or a good enough quarterback, to use those 2 picks in the first round to make someplace else better, whether it's your offense around the guy or add some defensive, whatever. You can do both with 2 first round picks. So that's the other thing they have to kind of balance is it's probably better to have a veteran start early. But then if they do kind of get off to a bad start and they do lose a bunch of games to good teams early, now you have to get into this mode of we kind of got to find out if one of these rookies, if maybe we hit this scratch off ticket with one of these rookies, and now maybe we don't have to think about quarterback in the 26th draft. That's one of the complications of kind of the strategy they have in place here.
Right. And as you mentioned, all of it is complicated and difficult to try to figure out because while you have an eye towards 2026 and those really good quarterbacks that we all think are going to be coming out in 2026, we're already starting to hear so many things about Arch Manning and other quarterbacks that are going to be coming out in 2026. And the Browns having these 2 first round picks. They are an organization, in my mind, that will still go out there and try to win every game. It's what they did in 2024. They went out and tried to win every single game down the stretch, even though it would have helped them not to. It would have helped them tremendously this year to have the number 1 overall pick and to be able to draft Cam Ward and see what he could have been for you. So, they eschewed the opportunity to do that and went out and tried to win football games. And I think that's what they're going to do again, and then let the chips fall where they may. They already have 2 first-round picks, and if they had to give up another first-round pick or whatever they would have to do to get a quarterback that they really covet next year, then they'll probably have to just go ahead and do that. They would also still have Myles Garrett, who might still want greener pastures next year. I mean, you never know. You could do a multitude of things to try to get what you want in the event that you need it. But I do think that they are going to try to win as many games as they can. It's the only way to operate for your fans, for your players, for your organization. I really think that for the most part, that's what they're going to have to do.
Back on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast, we put a little break in there, a little pull back the curtain a little bit. Shedeur Sanders signed his contract in between those segments there. So while we went to an ad break, Mary Kay put up the story on Shedeur Sanders signing. I will say this, Mary Kay, the CBA in 2011 is maybe the best thing that's ever happened to at least us as sports reporters, as Browns reporters, because it really kind of makes these things all pretty standard. But one of the things you did point out in your story, just as an aside, is how much money Shedeur Sanders lost in that slide, whether it was from number 2. I mean, you pointed out the number 2 pick, obviously, because that would have been the Browns. But even had he been just a first rounder, like just the amount of money he lost, just from a salary standpoint, a signing bonus standpoint, that slide really cost him a lot of money.
Oh, it really did. It's staggering when you think about it. $42 million for the steepest fall in NFL draft history for a quarterback. He lost $42 million over the life of that contract. And that's why I asked him when we talked to him at rookie minicamp, you're still standing here. You never have lost a smile on your face. How are you keeping your head up throughout all of this? And, he just explained that, he's healthy, he's grateful, but $42 million and to slide from potentially number 2 overall all the way to number 144. At number 2, he would have made $46.571 million. And at 144, he's making about $4.646 million. $4.6 million and a signing bonus of about 447. I haven't looked up the signing bonus at number 2 yet, but definitely there's just millions left on the table here. But as I also pointed out in my story, he has a chance. It's up to him now. He has a chance to make something of his career and to make back that money because good quarterbacks in the NFL, they're going to make $42 million at some point, somehow, some way. It might not all be in 1 year, but if he is good enough, he can make all that money back. So now it's going to be up to him. And of course, as we know, he's in a 4-way battle for the starting job.
Yeah, I mean, look, Brock Purdy just signed a $265 million deal, and those numbers are just going to keep going up. So if somehow he surprises and becomes a starting quarterback in the league, he can obviously make a ton of money. Even if he sort of settles in as a backup for a long time and a guy that maybe gets some occasional starts here and there, and maybe sometime, maybe he has think about Sam Darnold, for example. And I'm not saying that they're the same guy, but Darnold struggled early in his career and then he revived and then he actually just signed a nice contract in Seattle. So even if it doesn't hit right away for Shedeur, if he can just kind of settle in and be patient, there could be some opportunity where he gets to start somewhere and then all of a sudden he parlays that into a nice deal someplace else. So there is a lot of money to be made out there if you're a quarterback in the NFL, even if you're not, one of the very top guys. And the other good thing for Shedeur too is he came up in the NIL era in college. So this is a guy that has made some money at least already.
Yes, he's definitely made some money already, as we can see by his double strand of diamonds that he wears around his neck, and the big gifts that he bestows upon people. Bought one of his offensive linemen a Mercedes, so he made millions, at least $6.6 million or something in NIL money. So he was already a little bit ahead of the game. But once again, as you mentioned, a lot of these quarterbacks, if they prove their worth, they can go out there and get good second contracts. Look at and third contracts and fourth contracts. Look at Geno Smith. For Pete's sake, Geno just signed a really, really big contract with the Raiders. You've got Jared Goff reviving his career. You've got Baker Mayfield reviving his career and making the big money after it seemed like he was not going to live up to his earning potential. So Shedeur Sanders absolutely 100% has the chance to do this, but it's going to be up to him. And it might not even be here. Maybe it's not here, but he does have the chance to make up for all of this.
Yeah, and for the Browns, this also just kind of speaks to the low risk of this move. You basically have a guy that you signed for his contract is worth like $4 million, $4.5 million, like, and you kind of can do what you want now. He becomes an asset for you. So again, maybe he shocks the world and becomes your franchise quarterback. I wouldn't put anything past a guy with the last name Sanders. And look, we spent time on this podcast talking about how much we liked him coming out. So I think there's a good quarterback in there, but also the Browns can use him. Let's say they get him on the field, like we talked about earlier, and he shows just enough, right? Like to where maybe not enough for you to not draft a quarterback in 26, but enough to maybe intrigue some other teams to give you something for him, and then he can go someplace else and be successful. There's a lot of scenarios for Shedeur Sanders that could work out in his favor. And I think the thing about him is I think he's got the personality, and I think he's got the work ethic to kind of work with whatever's kind of thrown at him here in the first year.
Absolutely. And even when you look at a quarterback like Kenny Pickett has an opportunity this year to do the same kind of thing. He didn't make it yet to that big second contract, but he has the opportunity, if he plays well this year, to put himself back on the NFL map. And it's possible to do. A lot of guys have done it. And not only have the starters done it, but there have been some backups that have just continued to go out there and make millions and millions and millions of dollars. The Jameis Winstons of the world, the Jacoby Brissetts, the Brian Hoyers, the Colt McCoys. You can hang around a long time as a backup and make a ton of money. So he's got an opportunity here. And every single day that he's in Browns practice and OTAs and mini camp and training camp, he just has to go out there and do what he knows how to do. And that's play some football and see where he can take this thing.
All right, let's get back to some questions here from our Football Insider subscribers. And this goes back to the draft process. Tom in Middlebury, Connecticut. Hey, Mary Kay. A month later, with no disrespect to the players, I still don't understand the draft process. Spending 4 picks on quarterbacks and running backs with so many other gaps on the roster still doesn't make sense, especially if the plan might be to draft a quarterback next year. Convince Tom that he is wrong.
Well, first of all, why not take a couple of swings or a couple of bites at the quarterback apple? Why not do that? I was all about doing that anyways and seeing what you could come up with. As Andrew Berry pointed out, once you get to the 5th round, you're really kind of looking at special teams contributors and maybe guys that might come in and be able to do something for you somewhere along the line. Why not have that be a quarterback that, once again, you might be able to use as an asset down the road? So we'll see how that turns out. And then running backs, you needed to restock your running back room. You needed to do that. Those 2 guys are your 1 and 2 running backs this year. And it's not like you had some great running backs that you were going to hang your hat on this whole entire season. They single-handedly will revamp and overhaul and revive that running game. So I have no problem with that whatsoever. Once again, funny part about it, I had been advocating two running backs, two quarterbacks, but that's when they had 10 picks. I didn't absolutely think they would do it with only 7 picks, but so be it. But they also added a number of other players in free agency, and they just added 2 safeties last week. They've added offensive linemen. They've added linebackers, defensive guys. So we almost kind of forget about a lot of those guys because we have not seen them yet. We haven't talked to them. Even Deontay Johnson, the receiver who has a chance to come in here and basically salvage his career with a last ditch effort here, a last chance to get out there and prove that he's more than the knucklehead he has seemed to be. There are a lot of players that they've added to this football team, and not all of them are going to be starters or superstars, but they have filled a lot of holes in free agency as well.
Yeah, I always go back to Malik Collins. He's like the guy that we always forget, but I think he's a pretty good player. I mean, he's obviously older. He's a veteran guy, but at that defensive tackle position, seems like a pretty nice addition. We'll see. But there are a lot of guys like that they've added. I mean, again, I think we talked about this on draft nights or that draft weekend. I could nitpick some things with this draft, and I do think, trading up to get Shedeur gave it a little bit of a scattershot feel in some ways, but also I really can't complain about. I mean, I can't complain about Mason Graham and Quinshon Judkins, Harold Fannin, Carson Schlesinger, like Dylan Sampson. I can't complain about those picks. Now, the Dillon Gabriel pick, that was the Browns saying we like this guy maybe more than other people do. Okay, we'll see. Would I have liked a receiver maybe somewhere instead of a linebacker? Sure, but they also need that linebacker, especially now with JOK who's going to miss the whole year. So I didn't have an issue. Maybe I would have approached it differently, but I understand what Tom is saying, but I don't have an issue with what the Browns did in this draft, especially with those skill players, with Schlesinger, Graham, Judkins, Sampson, and Fannin. Like those 5 guys, it all kind of leans into, I think, what you're trying to do this year. And also, all of those guys could potentially be a huge part of your core moving forward. So I understand what Tom is saying. I don't 100% disagree, but I also just don't have an issue with this draft outside of maybe I'm not completely sure what they were doing at quarterback. But even that, hey, they're taking 2 swings at the position, and if neither of them work out, they're going to be right back in a good spot to try again next year.
Right. And it looks to me like they may have come out of this draft with a lot of starters. And that doesn't happen every year. And it certainly hasn't happened here every year. But so far in the early going, including with what we just saw at rookie minicamp, it looks to me like they've gotten starters out of Graham and Schlesinger and the 2 running backs and Fannin. And even if that's it, then that's still a pretty good draft, I think. And then you have a chance with the quarterbacks or one of the quarterbacks. So I think this might prove to be one of Andrew Berry's better drafts, especially when you look at it in total with what else he got out of it, including the first round pick from next year.
Yeah, and again, I like them kind of leaning into an identity, and they'll add receivers, whether it's in free agency or trades or the draft. Like next offseason, they will add to this receiving core. But this year, we're going to get to find out about Ced Tillman a little bit and see what he can do. We're going to see if Deontay Johnson can salvage his career. I do think there are areas on this roster, too, where it's kind of like we want to see some of these young guys. We want to see Tillman to a lesser extent, right? A guy like Jamari Thrash. They drafted him a year ago. I'm sure they'd like to get a better look at him. There are certain areas where I think that was part of it too, is we've got some young guys we like. So let's give these guys an opportunity this year.
Yes, absolutely 100%. But having said that, I would still be keeping my eyes peeled for one more really great Pro Bowl caliber type receiver. Now, Deontay Johnson is that. He is a Pro Bowl level or caliber receiver. He's made the Pro Bowl before. So he has that kind of talent, but he's just kind of messed it all up with his behavior and with his attitude and with his inability to keep himself under control. So if the Browns can find the key to having him be the best version of himself, then they could be onto something with him. If not, then I still think that they need to get at least one more guy in here that can play at that level. Because what if Jerry Jeudy has to miss any length of time? You can't put all your eggs in that basket. And I understand that they're going to be playing more 2 tight end sets this year and more 3 tight end sets this year. They probably don't feel like they need to have as many receivers around. And they're very excited to have said Tillman come back, but he's also one more concussion away from missing a bunch of games again. So I would be backing myself up with at least one other Pro Bowl caliber receiver. Don't know where you're going to get him. Sometimes these guys shake out after June 1st. Sometimes they get let go in final cuts. Sometimes you can find somebody who wants a change of scenery and you can make another trade. So these are some of the things that I would be looking to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, don't give. I'm absolutely scared to death of this receiving core. If the wrong guy, like you said, if Jerry Jeudy gets hurt, and maybe said Tillman isn't the guy that flashed for those 3 or 4 games last year, and like we're sitting there on a Sunday, and your starting receivers are Jamari Thrash and Michael Woods, and guys who aren't going to be your top 2 guys. I do again. I feel like I would have loved a receiver in this draft or something, but yeah, it's at the same time, it's hard for me to argue. Like Dylan Sampson was a guy they really liked, and so they went and got him, and they sounds kind of like they went best available there, at least as far as their board was concerned. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how this all goes. But it was a very interesting draft in that sense that they used two picks on quarterbacks, 2 picks on running backs. I'm not convinced that you weren't in that draft room, Mary Kay. I mean, you were sitting right there next to me the whole time, but I'm not convinced that you didn't sneak up there at some point when I was out of the room or something, telling them what to do in that draft. Let's get to one more question here. This one has to do with JOK. Johnny Williams from Warrensville Heights. Hey, Mary Kay, my question is whether there's a percentage that can be placed on whether JOK ever plays again, because he hasn't heard whether his chances are good or otherwise. And of course, if you missed it, we did talk a little bit about, we did a whole pod basically on JOK last week after the news came out that he was going on season-ending PUP, so he will not play in 2025. But of course, now the question becomes, will we see JOK on the field again after 2025?
It's a great question, and I am leaning towards, I'm probably leaning towards no on that, because if you know already in April or May of this year that you're not going to be able to be on the field in September, it just kind of gives me pause about what's kind of going on with him in his career. And I'm sure they're going to give him all the time that he needs to continue to work out, to try to come back, to see what he can get done and accomplish. But I just feel like he might be at that point where he is going to deem it too risky to go back out there and try to play football again when he had such a severe and serious and limb-threatening neck injury. So I would probably be leaning right now towards that it might be a long shot for him to get back out there, because the truth of the matter is you're probably not really going to know until you have that first contact again how this thing's going to hold up. And we don't even know the nature of the injury. No one has ever revealed or told us what the injury is. So we just don't really know. And maybe if we knew, we would have a better prognosis for the future. But I think that's part of the confusion about all this.
Yeah, it's just anytime you basically shut a guy down in the spring before he even gets out there, and he didn't play all last year, and it is an injury like this, it's just so it doesn't bode well. But I guess what they've done is they've bought everybody more time, right? Like they basically, look, we're putting you on the PUP list for 25. We're going to buy everybody a little more time, give this thing a little more time to recover, let you talk to the people you need to talk to, go through your process, and then we'll revisit this again next offseason, I guess. But it's never great when a guy already missed most of last year, and we're at this point in the offseason and they're already saying like you're not playing football this year. It's tough, and it's too bad because JOK, like we talked about on that pod, was becoming one of those guys, and I think he is a special player who just moves differently. He's unique in the way that Myles Garrett is unique. Maybe he's not I don't know. Maybe he would have played his way into a defensive player of the year conversation at some point, but just in the way he moves, like you don't see people bend like Myles Garrett and play like Myles Garrett. And I think JOK is you don't see a lot of guys that move and play the way he does. And that's part of what makes him so difficult to replace. And it's just too bad. It's that maybe we might not see him on the field again.
And he was really just kind of coming into his own. I think even last year, he elevated his game and took it to another level. And he was really becoming the complete linebacker that the Browns knew he could be when they traded up to draft him in 2021 in the second round out of Notre Dame. They really saw some things in him that they felt he could be special and a perennial Pro Bowler and someone who could blitz and cover and use his speed and range to get side to side and make plays behind the line of scrimmage and just get interceptions and do everything. I mean, he was just an all-purpose hybrid type of defender. You don't find that guy very often. And again, he was just really starting to scratch the surface of what he was capable of. So, of course, here's hoping that he makes it back. I certainly hope that he does. I know you certainly hope that he does. We all do. We're all hoping for that. We're all pulling for that. But the number one concern always going forward in the minds of everyone is the health and safety of JOK. That's paramount.
Yeah, and then, again, I think Carson Schlesinger has a chance to be really good, but I do think people should be a little caught. Like, again, JOK is like just a different guy. And so it just changes. It changes sort of how you have to build out this defense now too, as opposed to, thinking you had JOK in the middle of it for the next 5-10 years, however long. Now you kind of have to make some adjustments and changes. But I do think at least they hedged their bets a little bit by picking Schlesinger, who has a chance to be really good as well. Lance Reisland wrote about Carson Schlesinger today. You can check that out at cleveland.com/Browns. We also did a podcast looking back at rookie minicamp and a bunch of pods last week talking JOK. There was a HMK, there was a schedule release pod. You can find all of those if you go back on our feed on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I told you our socials off the top, but one more time, Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com is the YouTube. Orange and Brown Talk is the Instagram, and Orange Brown Talk is our X account. Mary Kay, I will talk to you later.
Sounds great.